What I'm going to do is to break down what happens if you do Gradle init and create a multi-module project. I'm doing this because what it generates is kind of a useful example, but I don't know if it's necessarily the starting place I would want for a multi-module project, or at least it's not the starting place I'd want as somebody coming into Gradle. So I'm going to try to break it down, reduce it to the bare minimum. So just to show you what I'm talking about here, if we run Gradle init inside of a directory, and then it's going to give us some options, and let's say that we want to create an application, and let's say that we want it to be Kotlin. And then here's specifically what I'm talking about here. It's asking me if we want multiple sub-projects, and we're going to say yes, because many times applications are going to have more than one project associated with them. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Now for the DSL here, we're going to pick Kotlin as well. This is the domain specific language. This is basically what we're going to write our Gradle scripts in. So we're going to say yes. And we're going to go ahead and take the default name here and say yes to that. And it's going to, one more, sure. Okay, so this is what the directory structure is going to look like here if you use that Gradle init in the multi-module project. By default, what it creates here is three sub-projects. So you have an app, you have a list, and you have utilities. These are all three sub-projects. And you can see that here at the top level, you have the settings.gradle.kts. Notice there's no build.gradle.kts at the top level, just the settings. And then there's also the Gradle wrapper at the top level. So if you look at the settings here, you notice it just has, basically it's mostly just saying, here's what our project name is, and it's saying to include these as sub-projects. So that's really all that's important in here. So then you can have a look at these, and of course you can see the basic directory structure that it defines here. We've got our project name, our source, then we have main, then we're going to have a language, and then we'll have our packages under there and our various actual source code. And it's created some filler, sort of silly demonstration source code for us. And you'll see same kind of structure. Under each of these, you have the source, main, Kotlin, package, some Kotlin code. It's also created, tests under each of these, because by default it's including the test framework with this and some basic tests. Same here with utilities. Now, what I find interesting here with what it's done is if you look at some of these, like say build Gradle.kts under utilities, you'll notice there's not much in here. It's specifying list here as a dependency, and then it's specifying this plugin, and this plugin, you'll notice my name in it. So this obviously isn't some sort of plugin that's coming from the internet, from our repository. And there's really not a lot going on in here. So kind of, what is this? Kotlin library conventions. Well, if you look up here in build source, you'll notice it has this directory here, which has its own source, and you'll notice under this source a bunch of different Kotlin script files here, including we've got a common conventions, an application conventions, and a library conventions. And if you look at each of these, this is kind of a little bit more like what I might expect to see, in the build.gradle.kts, right? This is specifying the Java library plugin. This is the, the actual known published plugin we're going to pull in. And notice if you look at the library and if you look at the application conventions, they both pull in as a plugin this common convention, but they separately will add either the application plugin or the Java library plugin. So really what's going on here is basically this is a way that we're kind of sharing common things throughout all these different modules. So we have this one kind of common conventions file here, which that's where we're going to pull in our Kotlin plugin. We're specifying Maven Central as the repository. We're pulling in a common test implementation dependency, a common test runtime test dependency, and some common setting some constraints on other common dependencies, and setting up some basic JVM settings and so forth, right? So then basically what that's letting us do is to not really have to have very much in each of these build Gradles, because mostly they're just pulling in. They're either saying, hey, this is a library I'm building. You know, this one is for the list, and this is sort of the bottom of our dependency tree, so it has nothing else but this. And then you get to utilities, which basically same thing, almost nothing else, except that you can see that it depends on the list project. And then finally you get up to our app, which puts it all together. But again, not a lot here. It's pulling in the application conventions, and then it's pulling in this common text. Notice it doesn't have the version. I think that's being handled by the constraints that were set up here. And then it's saying I depend on the utilities project, and then it's setting our main class so that we know what to run. What I want to do next is to basically rebuild this from scratch, and maybe even a little simpler, less dry. Not necessarily saying this is best practice, but just as an exercise on kind of understanding what's important.